"Ma'am, did you just say arrest? Over what exactly?" That's what the officer asked when Eleanor Morrison, our neighborhood's self-proclaimed Ho Queen, called 911 to have my wife taken into custody the day she came back from active duty. For months, Eleanor had made life miserable for everyone in our otherwise idyllic suburban neighborhood, assigning residents over mailbox colors and using a ruler to measure grass height. She thought she could add my wife to her list of targets. But when Sarah refused to play along with Eleanor's petty power games, Eleanor made a phone call that would unravel her entire empire. What followed became the stuff of local legend, a true neighborhood justice in action. Let me take you back 3 months earlier. My wife Sarah had been away on a high-level federal mission, tracking dangerous fugitives across multiple states. Meanwhile, I stayed behind in Willowbrook Heights, our picture-perfect neighborhood. Picture this: spotless lawns, identical mailbox styles, and residents who practically studied HOA rules for entertainment. And reigning over it all, Eleanor Morrison, the president of our homeowners association. She ran things like a monarchist, stern, strategic, and draped in faux civility. Eleanor wasn't your run-of-the-mill HOA leader. She was the type to catalog every infraction in spreadsheets, inspect grass with a ruler, and issue warnings like she was conducting a military operation. Widowed for nearly 10 years and well into her 50s, Eleanor had made policing the neighborhood her full-time obsession. Every morning, without fail at 7:30 a.m., she would exit her flawless colonial-style house and begin her inspection walks, a clipboard in hand, taking note of anything from untidy hedges to garbage cans lingering too long at the curb. During Sarah's absence, I'd managed to avoid Eleanor's scrutiny. I kept my lawn neat, the trash handled, and music volume low. I genuinely thought I was being a model resident. What I didn't realize was that Eleanor had been quietly watching, waiting for an opportunity to assert her authority over the quiet freelancer who worked from home. In her eyes, not leaving the house for a traditional job made me automatically suspicious. The incident happened on a Saturday afternoon in late September. Sarah was finally coming home after 3 grueling months away, and I wanted everything to be perfect for her return. That morning, I pressure washed our driveway until the concrete looked brand new. Then, I planted 6 lavender bushes, her favorite flower, along the walkway as a welcome home surprise. I was on my knees planting the final lavender when I heard sharp, deliberate clicks of high heels on pavement. Eleanor was heading straight toward me, her face locked into that familiar expression of self-righteous fury. In one hand, her signature clipboard. In the other, a professional-grade camera. "Stop immediately," she snapped, her tone oozing authority. "You're breaking at least 3 HOA regulations." I looked up, startled. "Hello, Eleanor. I'm just planting flowers for my wife's homecoming." She didn't respond, just started taking photos of me, the pressure washer, and the innocent lavender bushes like she was gathering evidence for a crime report. She rattled off the infractions: noise disturbance during weekend quiet hours, unauthorized landscaping, and excessive water usage during a municipal drought restriction, all while scribbling notes between camera clicks. According to her, I needed prior approval from the Architectural Review Board before making any landscaping changes. I stood, dusting off my knees, trying to remain composed. "Eleanor, it's Saturday afternoon. I'm just adding a few flowers to our yard." I had no idea beautifying my home needed a committee vote. Her cold smile said everything. She clicked one last photo. "Not knowing the rules doesn't exempt you, Leo. Expect a notice soon." With that, she turned and stormed back to her house, leaving me standing there, dirt on my hands and an uneasy feeling growing in my gut. I had a strong sense this wasn't just an isolated incident, it was the beginning of something bigger. An hour later, I got an email. Subject line: official violation notice, immediate payment required, $400. $400 for planting flowers and washing my driveway. The message was slick and formula complete with time-stamped photos and references to HOA bylaw codes. But something didn't sit right. As I scanned the email, a detail jumped out. The timestamp on the citation showed it was issued 6 days earlier, almost a full week before I'd even begun any yard work. The violation was dated September 15th, but today was September 21st. She'd backdated the entire thing, fabricating a violation for something that hadn't even happened yet. This wasn't about upholding neighborhood rules. This was about dominance. Eleanor Morrison had officially declared war on me, and her opening move was a lie. Sitting in my office, surrounded by half-finished design work and project deadlines, something in me shifted. For 15 years, I'd built my freelance career from the ground up. I knew how to handle demanding clients and impossible deadlines. I'd learned patience and diplomacy. But this was different. Eleanor didn't want compliance, she wanted complete obedience. If she could manipulate a date on a penalty notice, what else was she capable of? Have you ever been up against someone who plays this dirty? That night, I buried myself in HOAless, complaint protocols, and the association's enforcement records. I studied like I was prepping for a final exam. What I found would both shock and empower me. Eleanor had elevated selective rule enforcement to a near-professional level at targeting certain neighbors while turning a blind eye to others committing the exact same infractions. For example, Mrs. Henderson, just 2 houses down, had been operating an unlicensed daycare for over 6 months without a single warning. Meanwhile, the young couple across from us had been fined multiple times simply for leaving their trash cans out for more than 4 hours after pickup. I spent countless hours gathering evidence, meticulously documenting Eleanor's pattern of harassment masked as community management. My photos revealed her close friends parking their RVs in driveways for weeks, a clear violation under Section 4.3 of the HOA guidelines. At the same time, she penalized the Martinez family $50 for parking a boat trailer for just 1 weekend. The deeper I dug, the more obvious it became Eleanor wasn't upholding rules. She was weaponizing them to maintain control over anyone who challenged her dominance. With a mountain of evidence and a growing sense of justice, I carefully composed what I proudly considered a masterstroke of polite rebellion. The subject line of my email to all 47 homeowners read, "Community question. Are our rules being applied fairly?" The message was crafted with the precision of a legal document, complete with side-by-side image comparisons showing clear inconsistencies in enforcement. But the highlight, Eleanor's backdated violation against me, paired with metadata screenshots that irrefutably proved the penalty had been created 6 days before the alleged offense. The reaction was swift and overwhelming. Within minutes, my phone lit up with calls and messages. Neighbors I'd barely exchanged pleasantries with were suddenly reaching out, eager to share their own Eleanor horror stories. The retired teacher next door recounted being fined because her newspaper was delivered to the wrong area. A father just a few homes down told me about a citation he received for having his kids' toys visible from a second-floor window. It turned out Eleanor's petty tyranny had touched nearly every home, but no one had ever compiled the proof. Within 6 hours, my email was circulating beyond our neighborhood. It appeared in local Facebook groups and community forums throughout the township. Eleanor's carefully curated image of a fair and principled HOA leader collapsed under the weight of undeniable evidence. Phones rang between homes. Whispered frustrations turned into loud conversations. Years of silent resentment poured out as people compared notes and realized how much power they had collectively handed over to one woman. The woman who once ruled with fear and passive-aggressive threats was suddenly exposed as a neighborhood tyrant clinging to the imaginary throne of a volunteer title. By noon the following day, Eleanor was forced to send a community-wide apology. It was a masterclass in vague, corporate-style damage control, filled with phrases like procedural miscommunication and clerical oversight. She reluctantly voided my $400 fine, doing so with the grace of someone chewing glass. But it was her follow-up email sent privately to my inbox that truly unsettled me. 3 chilling words: "You won today, no threats, no accusations, just a reminder, a warning." Eleanor Morrison wasn't someone who accepted defeat or she plotted retaliation. This wasn't the end, it was only the beginning of something darker. The following week, she made sure her presence was impossible to ignore. Every evening around 6 p.m., she'd pace the sidewalk in front of my house, phone to her ear, pointing toward my yard while scribbling notes. She even brought out a contractor's tape measure, inspecting distances and marking observations. She wasn't being discreet, the point was intimidation. I knew I was being watched, measured, and prepped for something more serious than a bogus HOA violation. Then came the black government sedan. It showed up on a Tuesday morning, I was working in my home office when I noticed the unfamiliar vehicle parked directly in front of Eleanor's home. A sharply dressed man in a tailored suit stepped out and embraced Eleanor warmly on her front porch. This wasn't some casual visitor. The license plate frame read, City of Willowbrook, a official vehicle. And when Eleanor gestured toward my house while handing over a thick folder, something in me sank. The man was young, early 30s maybe, but his posture radiated confidence. He had the kind that comes from real authority. He had the bearing of someone used to making decisions that impact lives. They spoke for about 20 minutes. Eleanor kept pointing at my house. When they finally wrapped up, the look on her face chilled me to my core. She looked satisfied, calculated, like she'd just pulled the trigger on a plan she'd been preparing for weeks. After the car drove off, she lingered on her porch, just staring in my direction. The expression wasn't anger or smugness, it was anticipation. When she noticed me watching through the window, she raised a hand and waved. Cheerful, almost friendly, but it felt like a knife wrapped in silk. That night, I double-checked our security system. Sarah had insisted we install it before she left for her mission, half joking that it was protection from overly enthusiastic salespeople and bossy HOA leaders. At the time, I'd laughed at her. Now, I was thankful for her trained instinct. I tried to call her, but as expected her phone went straight to voicemail. Sarah's work often came with strict communication blackouts. I didn't want to distract her with this neighborhood mess when she was dealing with real criminals. I had managed round one. I was determined to survive whatever Eleanor planned next. But who was that man in the suit? And why did his presence shake me more than anything Eleanor had done so far? I hadn't heard Sarah's government-issued vehicle until it was already in the driveway. 3 months of chasing fugitives across multiple states had changed her in subtle but unmistakable ways. Her posture was sharper, eyes constantly scanning her surroundings, and her movements were smooth and measured, like someone who had spent months prepared for a threat to emerge at any moment. When she finally hugged me in the kitchen, I could feel the weight of her service weapon and the tension in her shoulders, a physical reminder of the high-stakes world she'd just returned from. "What happened while I was gone?" she asked, her voice edged with that unmistakable tone agents use when something feels off. Sarah had always been sharp, but her recent assignment had honed her instincts to surgical precision. I tried to keep things light, brushing off the Eleanor situation as nothing more than neighborhood nonsense. But Sarah listened like she was reviewing a criminal case file, quietly focused, her questions pointed and deliberate. She asked about timing, escalation, behavioral changes. It was clear she was building a profile. "Leo," she said once I'd finished, "this isn't harmless neighbor drama. This is a strategic campaign by someone who manipulates through intimidation." And the fact that she already had a government contact ready to act, that didn't happen overnight. She's been laying groundwork. Years of law enforcement had trained Sarah to spot patterns in manipulation, and Eleanor had triggered every one of her professional warning bells. "People like her don't stop," she said, "unless they run into someone with more power than they do." Saturday morning arrived, crisp and clear, the perfect kind of day for the gardening Sarah had missed while away. She dressed casually in jeans, sneakers, and a light-weight jacket, but I noticed she still wore her credential wallet clipped at her side. Muscle memory, I guessed. We were watering the lavender plants, the ones that had somehow launched this entire ordeal, when Eleanor appeared, storm-like, from across the street. She marched across her yard with the energy of a general heading into battle, gripping a thick manila folder, her face a mask of righteous resolve. It was clear she'd been preparing for this confrontation. "I've already spoken to your husband about our neighborhood rules," she began, voice booming with the confidence of someone used to immediate obedience. Her folder looked like it was stuffed with documentation, photos, violation forms, official-looking printouts. This was her ammunition. "This is a community that respects property values and enforces appropriate standards," she continued, attempting to re-establish control. Sarah rose slowly from her crouched position, and her energy shifted in a way only someone who knew her could catch. Her body was calm, her tone even. "Good morning. We're just tending the garden." Eleanor's frustration was immediate. Sarah's composure, her calm refusal to react, only pushed Eleanor further toward unraveling. "You people think the rules don't apply to you," she snapped, her polished persona beginning to slip. exposing the control freak beneath. I've documented everything. I have the authority to make sure this community follows the rules. We have standards here. Her voice rose with each word, escalating like someone unused to being challenged. You think you are above the law? I'm calling the police. Sarah didn't flinch. Her voice stayed cool, calm, but resolute. Go ahead. There was something in her tone, and not threatening, not defiant, just a broken bar absolute. It should have been a warning to Eleanor that she was about to cross a line she couldn't come back from. But Eleanor, convinced she held the upper hand, pulled out her phone like a card she'd been waiting to play. Yes, I need officers here immediately, she told the dispatcher. There's a woman here with a fake federal badge, and she's threatening people in the neighborhood. At the word fake, I saw Sarah's posture shift. It was subtly, barely emotional, but every move that followed was calculated. Without a word, she opened her jacket, revealing her official credential wallet clipped to her belt. The badge inside caused the morning light, gleaming unmistakably with government-issued authority. When she spoke again, her tone was the one I'd only ever heard in professional settings: icy, formal, and commanding. What department are you calling? Eleanor's face morphed from fiery indignation to pure horror in less than a second. The phone trembled in her hand. She'd just called 911 to accuse a real federal agent of impersonating a federal agent. The irony was staggering. Under different circumstances, it would have been almost comical, but Eleanor looked like she was about to pass out from the sheer humiliation of what she'd just done. Ma'am, you are reporting a fake badge? The dispatcher's voice rang out clearly from Eleanor's phone, still held uselessly to her ear. Eleanor opened her mouth, then closed it again. No words came. She stood frozen, paralyzed by the reality of her mistake unfolding in real time. Ma'am, are you still there? Do you need medical assistance? The dispatcher asked, now clearly confused by the silence on the other end. Eleanor didn't answer. She just ended the call, but it was too late. The consequences were already rolling toward her. Within minutes, 2 patrol cars pulled up, their officers stepping out with professional alertness. This was no ordinary call. It had been flagged as a possible federal impersonation case. The younger officer lit up when he saw Sarah. Sarah, what are you doing here? I thought you were still chasing fugitives across state lines. His tone was relaxed, friendly. Clearly they knew each other from a previous operation. The older sergeant approached Eleanor, carrying the wary patience of someone who had dealt with every imaginable civilian error. Ma'am, he said gently, you reported someone with a fake federal badge? Eleanor remained stiff, her face drained of color. Then came the final blow. This is Deputy U.S. Marshal Sarah Rodriguez, the sergeant continued. 8-year veteran, just returned from a multi-state fugitive recovery assignment. It was over. Her humiliation wasn't just complete, it was public. Neighbors had gathered on their porches and sidewalks, watching the scene unfold. Everyone witnessed Eleanor's defeat. And as the patrol cars quietly drove away, Eleanor was left standing alone on her lawn, the weight of her mistake sinking in with every glance from the surrounding homes. Neighbors stood on their porches and driveways, whispering and pointing, their eyes fixed on Eleanor. For the first time since I'd moved into this neighborhood, she looked a broken bar, powerless. She had just called the police on a federal officer, and the humiliation was absolute. But the look she gave me before retreating inside, that told me everything I needed to know. This wasn't over. This embarrassment wouldn't stop her. It would only make her more dangerous. Eleanor vanished for exactly 2 weeks. Not physically. Her porch lights still flicked on and off at their usual times. The morning paper disappeared from her driveway like clockwork. Her car moved just enough to suggest she was still around. But the woman who had once micromanaged every inch of Willowbrook Heights became a ghost. No early morning inspection walks, no clipboard patrols, no HOA violation emails, just a broken bar silence. But it wasn't the peaceful kind. It was the kind of silence that settles before a storm, the kind the news warns you not to ignore. Then, the strange incidents began. Anonymous complaints began surfacing in the city's official logs. A noise violation filed at 2:00 p.m. A time I'd been on a perfectly normal work call with a client. Accusations of suspicious odors coming from our backyard, where Sarah had planted a small herb garden. Reports of excessive delivery traffic. because a couple of package trucks used our driveway that week. Each complaint followed the right channels. Each one was filed officially. Together, they formed a paper trail and illusion of civic concern that masked a clear, targeted campaign. Sarah spotted the tactic immediately. "Someone's building a case," she said that evening, flipping through the records I'd pulled using public access laws. "This isn't random, it's structured, strategic." She recognized the pattern instantly. These were classic retaliation tactics designed to generate enough official documentation to justify action later. "Someone was assembling ammunition, and whoever's doing this," she added, "knows exactly how to navigate bureaucracy." It wasn't hard to guess who was behind it. Eleanor may have stepped back from public view, but this had her fingerprints all over it. Only now, she wasn't acting alone. Either she'd found a new strategy, a broken bar, or a new ally with actual power. Then the official letter arrived. It came on a Wednesday morning by certified mail. The envelope bore the city government seal. The sender, Office of Business Licensing and Municipal Compliance. Just holding it made my hands tremble. Inside was a formal notice an investigation had been launched into my home-based business. The accusation: illegally operating a commercial enterprise in a residential zone. The claims were extensive and terrifying. The letter cited multiple anonymous complaints and claimed my work violated zoning ordinances. The penalties: a $25,000 fine, a cease and desist order, and a 3-year ban from conducting any home-based business in our entire township. 15 years of building a freelance career suddenly in jeopardy. All because someone decided to abuse government mechanisms for personal revenge. I laid the papers out on the kitchen table, staring at them with numb disbelief. Our mortgage, equipment leases, insurance, client contracts, everything depended on my ability to work from home. "We'll lose the house," I whispered to Sarah, the words barely forming. 15 years of work, a broken bar gone, in 30 days. That was the deadline. 30 days to disprove the allegations and present complete documentation or face immediate enforcement. The panic hit me hard, like a blow to the chest. My mind spiraled. "I never should have fought back," I muttered, burying my face in my hands. "I should have just paid the fine, kept my head down. This is all my fault. Maybe I was wrong to challenge her. Maybe I'd underestimated how far Eleanor was willing to go. Maybe I'd overestimated my ability to stand up to someone with connections and a vendetta." Sarah sat beside me as I fell apart, but she didn't offer empty comfort. Her response was sharp, focused. "Leo, look at me," she said, firm and clear. "They made a mistake, and they left evidence everywhere." The instant she saw the letter, her training had kicked in. This was what she did: attract people who thought badges and bureaucracy made them immune. Her eyes scanned the documents like she was already building a case. "This isn't just harassment," she said. "This is a poorly concealed conspiracy." And they were arrogant enough to document it. Sarah's confidence cut through my fear like a scalpel. She'd handled organized criminals, high-level corruption, and interstate fugitives. This was amateur hour compared to the cases she'd closed. She didn't hesitate. Within minutes, she had started outlining our response plan: what records we needed, what laws had been misapplied, what officials had left digital fingerprints behind. "They chose the wrong family," she said quietly. "They thought you were just some guy with a laptop, but they targeted the wrong woman's home." Her voice carried the weight of years spent pursuing people who believed they were untouchable. The kind of voice that said, "I don't lose. For every document they created, we'll find the one that exposes them. And when we're done," she added, "they'll be the ones unraveling a one lie at a time." For the first time since opening that envelope, I felt something stronger than panic. I felt hope. Eleanor thought she could bury us under red tape and city stamps. But she forgot one critical detail. She picked a fight with a federal agent's family, and federal agents don't lose, they investigate. Eleanor had enlisted someone with serious government power to come after us, but what she didn't seem to realize was that she'd just made things personal and with someone who hunts corrupt officials for a living. Type "fight back if you think yeah and I should take them down." The next 2 weeks passed in an eerie, unnatural quiet, the kind you see in nature documentaries when a predator is just out of frame. waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Eleanor remained completely invisible. No sunrise patrols, no clipboard checks, no violation emails, nothing. But the anonymous complaints didn't stop. They kept rolling into city records like clockwork. A noise violation logged at 2p.m.a. While I was on a standard client call. Mysterious reports of strange odors supposedly coming from our backyard herb garden. Complaints about suspicious traffic patterns, all because UPS drivers used our driveway to turn around. Sarah saw the pattern immediately. "Someone's building a file," she said, flipping through the complaint logs I'd acquired through public information requests. "This isn't random neighbor drama anymore. It's a coordinated attempt to build a paper trail." She was right. This was documentation on purpose intended to justify heavier, government-level action later. Eleanor wasn't acting alone anymore. Someone with deep experience in bureaucratic manipulation was guiding her moves. "This is textbook harassment by design," Sarah explained, her voice low and steady. "Whoever's advising her knows exactly how to weaponize the system." Sarah's federal training had taught her to detect orchestrated campaigns like these, methods used by insiders who knew how to dress retaliation up as regulation. Eleanor's sudden shift from open hostility to strategic, silent warfare meant she'd either studied these tactics a broken bar or aligned herself with someone very dangerous. Then the letter came. It arrived like a bomb wearing a business suit, certified mail, sealed with the emblem of our city's Office of Business Licensing and Municipal Compliance. Just signing for it sent a chill through my bones. Some part of me already knew whatever was inside was meant to destroy everything I'd worked for. The envelope felt heavy, like it carried the weight of my entire career. Inside was a formal notice of investigation. The accusation: operating an illegal home business in violation of residential zoning laws. The details were brutal. The document cited multiple formal complaints, alleging that I was running a commercial enterprise out of our home without a proper licensee, supposedly in breach of every relevant ordinance. The penalties: a $25,000 fine per violation, a cease and desist order that would shut down my work within 72 hours, and a full 3-year ban on operating any home-based business in our township. I spread the papers across the kitchen table, calculating the fallout while trying to keep my hands from shaking. Mortgage payments, business insurance, equipment leases, client obligations. My entire life was tied to my ability to work from home as a freelance graphic designer. The deadline was merciless. I had 30 days to compile and submit comprehensive evidence proving I was in full legal compliance, or risk losing everything. I stared at the numbers, trying to breathe. "We'll lose the house, Sarah," I finally whispered. 15 years of building these, a broken bar gone in a month. Even if I proved my innocence in time, just being under investigation could destroy my reputation. What client would want to work with a designer being audited for running an illegal operation? Then I broke. I shoved my laptop off the table. It hit the floor with a sickening thud. I dropped into my chair and buried my face in my hands. Guilt, fear, rage, regret. It all came flooding in at once. I should have just paid the damn $400 fine, I muttered. Why did I have to fight her? Why couldn't I just be like everyone else and let it go? Maybe it was my pride, maybe it was stubbornness, or maybe I'd just been naive thinking I could take on someone with connections I didn't even know existed. What kind of idiot picks a fight with someone who can weaponize the entire city government? I asked, barely able to look at Sarah. I'm not a politician or lawyer. I make logos, I build websites, and now I'm being dragged into something I never saw coming. Sarah found me very defeated, overwhelmed, surrounded by paperwork that felt like a life sentence. But she didn't console me. She didn't panic. Her eyes locked on mine. "Leo," she said, "listen to me. They messed up, badly, and they left evidence." Her tone snapped me out of the fog. That calm, clipped tone, the one she used when briefing teams or confronting suspects. The federal agent was back. "This is what I do for a living," she said, her voice sharp and precise. "I take down criminals who abuse power, people who think titles and connections make them untouchable." She scanned the documents again, already piecing things together. "And these people?" she said. They just made the rookie mistake of documenting a conspiracy. Every false complaint, every fabricated report. It's all traceable. Her mind was already in motion at tracking, analyzing, building a counter case with the efficiency of someone who'd done this before. Many times. They picked the wrong family, she said, her eyes locked on the city seal. They declared war on a federal agent's household. And that, she added, her voice colder than steel, is the kind of mistake that ends careers a broken bar and sometimes lands people in prison. For the first time since that letter landed in our mailbox, the panic inside me started to melt. Hope crept back in, a quiet but strong. Eleanor thought she'd broken us, but she didn't know who she was really fighting. And this time, we weren't backing down. And in that moment, I remembered my wife didn't just have a federal badge. She was lethal with it. 3 months chasing fugitives across 4 states, each one cuffed and flown back to face justice. Eleanor Morrison and her pet bureaucrat were about to learn they'd picked a fight with someone who specialized in dismantling people exactly like them. We're going to find every piece of evidence they left behind, Sarah said, her voice cold and precise, her face locked into the expression she wore when breaking down criminal enterprises. Then we're going to let them destroy themselves with their own arrogance, because people who abuse government power all make the same fatal error. They think authority makes them untouchable. That belief always becomes their undoing. Eleanor had recruited someone with real governmental teeth to come after USA, but she hadn't counted on the one person who hunts corrupt officials for a living. Type fight back if you think Sarah and Leo should take them down. Sarah approached our situation like an open case, filing meticulously, methodically. She began by dissecting the investigation letter itself, spreading the pages across our dining table like a crime scene map. Every formal investigation leaves a paper trail, she explained. And these people just handed us the breadcrumbs to their own conspiracy. Her training had taught her that bad actors almost always document their own corruption, especially the arrogant ones. They believe job titles shield them. They never expect to be caught. The first crack in the wall appeared within hours. The investigation letter was signed by Chad Morrison, senior city planning specialist. The last name hit like a thunderclap. A quick search confirmed our suspicion. Chad was Eleanor's nephew, a 33-year-old city employee, freshly promoted to senior status just 8 months earlier. His new role gave him authority over zoning enforcement and business licensing of the exact departments involved in the complaints against me. It all lined up too perfectly. Chad was Eleanor's insider, her weapon. His online profiles showed a man who had never learned the line between public duty and family loyalty. His government bio boasted about helping families uphold neighborhood standards, a carefully worded admission hiding in plain sight. The timing of his promotion aligned perfectly with the start of Eleanor's escalation. This hadn't been a reaction. This had been a plan. Sarah was in full agent mode now, scouring public records, zoning databases, employment logs, and social media trails. Her fingers flew across her laptop like she was defusing a bomb. We're looking for patterns of communication, timing, and most importantly, evidence they documented their own actions, she explained. They always do. She was right. On the third day of digging, we hit the jackpot. Buried inside a city employee form, one Chad must have assumed would remain internal, was a username, GoVarker92. At first glance, just another anonymous account, but I recognized the profile picture immediately, a stock skyline image I'd created 3 years ago for a municipal branding project. A reverse image search confirmed it. Chad had used my own work to mask his identity while bragging about destroying my career. The irony was poetic. We traced the account's posts across public forums. The writing matched Chad's style and timelines perfectly. His posts read like a tutorial in abuse of power, detailed walkthroughs of how a single complaint form could dismantle a freelancer's business, and smug reflections on helping family members resolve neighborhood disputes through proper channels. Then came the post that sealed his fate, dated 2 days before I received the investigation notice. It read, "Just helped my aunt deal with an annoying neighbor who thought he was smarter than the system. One city form equals destroyed business. Family connections matter in this town." Sarah photographed everything, every post, every timestamp. "This is textbook abuse of office," she said, her voice flat with professional fury. Conspiracy to retaliate using government authority. And now we have motive, method, and proof of coordination. Chad had basically confessed, publicly, with receipts. The digital trail only widened from there. Sarah pulled municipal phone logs and cross-referenced complaint timestamps. Dozens of calls between Chad and Eleanor, particularly right after I'd embarrassed her publicly. Worse, we discovered that every anonymous complaint filed against me had been processed personally by Chad. Normally, those would be randomly assigned to various city staffers. But not these. He'd rerouted them through himself. The coordination was so obvious it was almost laughably if the stakes hadn't been so high. They weren't just trying to silence a neighbor. They were orchestrating a slow, professional execution, and they'd just handed the entire case to a federal agent with nothing to lose. Building our defense meant assembling 8 years of airtight records, a meticulous documentation of a fully legal, fully compliant home-based business. Tax returns, licenses, zoning permits, signed client contracts. Every file told the same story: total adherence to the law, 0 violations, and not a single complaint until Eleanor's vendetta began. Chad's so-called investigation wasn't regulation, it was retaliation, a fabricated narrative propped up by fraudulent complaints and weaponized bureaucracy. Watching Sarah lay out our strategy was like watching a general prepare for war. Tomorrow, she said, sliding labeled folders across our dining table, we file for a formal hearing with the city council. She was in full agent mode, organizing our materials with courtroom precision. We're going to expose this entire conspiracy publicly, in front of the very officials who can terminate Chad's employment and refer him for prosecution. It felt like we'd finally stepped out of defense and into offense. The final piece of our case was the timeline. Every harassing email, every bogus complaint, every bragging post. It created a chain so perfectly aligned it didn't just imply guilt, it proved premeditated conspiracy. Chad and Eleanor hadn't just tried to ruin my career, they'd left a roadmap of their own crimes. And now, the only question left was, would it be enough? Comment gotcha if you think Chad just signed his own professional death warrant. Walking into the city council chamber felt like stepping into a courtroom where I was simultaneously the defendant, the whistleblower, and the key witness. Sarah and I arrived half an hour early, accompanied by our attorney, a veteran municipal law specialist who reviewed our documentation and called it, quote, the most blatant abuse of city power I've seen in 20 years. We carried folders thick with evidencia documents that didn't just defend my business, but exposed a system manipulated by personal revenge. Eleanor and Chad entered together, all smug confidence and whispered strategy, completely unaware their downfall had already been printed and stabled. Chad strolled in like a man who'd never faced accountability. Eleanor radiated the false assurance of someone used to winning through intimidation. They sat at the front of the gallery like prosecutors ready to present a case. But they weren't the accusers anymore. They were about to be exposed as defendants in the court of public record. The chamber filled quickly, and neighbors, business owners, residents from across the township. Word had spread. People who had once been afraid of Eleanor now whispered openly about her reign of harassment and Chad's questionable rise to power. This wasn't just about me anymore. It had become a public reckoning with systemic abuse. The city council filed in, solemn and serious. The council president, a composed woman in her 60s with a reputation for integrity, opened the hearing with clear authority. We are convened to review the investigation of Mr. Leo's home-based business and allegations of misconduct by municipal staff, she announced. This wasn't business as usual, it was a turning point. Chad was called first. He walked to the podium, shoulders squared, voice smooth, a polished performance. His presentation was littered with regulatory jargon, fake professionalism, and strategically vague citations. He displayed fabricated complaints, referenced community concerns, and painted me as a rule-breaker threatening neighborhood stability. His PowerPoint was a masterclass in manipulation of zoning maps, blurred photos, and legalese meant to confuse rather than clarify. Eleanor sat behind him, nodding like she was presiding over a courtroom instead of waiting for one to turn on her. Then it was our turn. Our attorney stood calmly, unfazed by the theatrics that had just unfolded. Council members, she began, Mr. Leo has operated a fully legal home-based business for 8 years, with complete compliance and zero complaints until this coordinated attack. She moved through our evidence with surgical precision: licenses, tax documents, permits, zoning approvals. The city's own records backed our case. My work as a graphic designer fell squarely within permitted use. The law was on our side, and the timeline showed Eleanor's complaints were the first ever filed in nearly a decade. Then came the bombshell. The timing and nature of these complaints, she continued, along with public online statements and municipal call logs, strongly indicate this was not legitimate enforcement but targeted retaliation. As she laid out the sequence of calls, complaint filings, and Chad's public admissions, the expressions on the council members' faces shifted from attentive to alarmed. This wasn't just negligence. It was a coordinated abuse of power. Then came the moment that changed everything. Council members, our attorney said, her voice unwavering, we are no longer merely defending against false accusations. We are presenting a formal complaint backed by evidence of a conspiracy between HOA President Eleanor Morrison and Senior Planning Specialist Chad Morrison to weaponize municipal authority for personal revenge. The room fell completely silent. The shift in energy was immediate and unmistakable. This was no longer a hearing about zoning permits. It was a reckoning. The revelation that Eleanor and Chad were family sent visible shockwaves through the city council chamber. Mr. Morrison failed to disclose a direct familial relationship with the complainant to his aunt when processing official actions against Mr. Leo, our attorney explained, laying down printed employment records and genealogy documents. That is a direct violation of the municipal ethics code, which requires recusal in cases involving personal connections. Council members exchanged uneasy glances as they digested the implications. One of their own department heads had broken one of the most basic rules of government conduct. But the real bombshell came next. Our attorney tapped the display screen, and Chad's anonymous forum post, so his own words appeared in bold across the chamber wall. Just helped my aunt deal with an annoying neighbor who thought he was smarter than the system. The date was 2 days before my investigation letter had arrived. Gasps echoed through the chamber. Chad's face drained of color as he watched his bragging scroll across the screen, boasting about weaponizing municipal channels, using his position to solve family problems, and mocking the idea of accountability. And the final insult, he'd used my own stock imagery art I had created it to hide behind a fake identity while planning to destroy my career. The irony hit harder than any speech I could have prepared. Council members sat stunned, their silence heavier than any verdict. Eleanor stared ahead, unmoving, as the whispers and stares around her made it painfully clear her reign was over. Residents began standing and walking out, shaking their heads, disgusted. Their body language spoke volumes: rejection, disappointment, and a growing refusal to tolerate this kind of abuse ever again. And then, I stood. My voice was steady. Council members, this was never about zoning or business licenses. This was about whether municipal power can be twisted into a personal weapon, whether family ties give someone permission to ruin a neighbor's life without consequence. I looked directly at each one. I followed every rule. I paid every tax. I obeyed every ordinance. And I was targeted because I refused to be intimidated. A long pause. Then the council president's voice rang out like a verdict. Mr. Morrison, she said, tone sharp, do you have any explanation for these posts, which appear to show coordination with your aunt on official city matters? Chad opened his mouth, closed it. Finally, he stammered, those posts were taken out of context. Someone must have hacked my account. A weak, desperate lie. But our attorney had come prepared with IP logs and account verification records tracing every post directly to Chad's personal devices. There was no escaping the digital fingerprints he'd left behind. The room's reaction was immediate. Murmurs turned to contempt. More residents stood and left, visibly outraged. Eleanor sat frozen, her usual smugness replaced by the haunted stillness of someone watching everything crumble. The council's decision came swiftly. Based on the evidence presented, the council president said firmly, we are dismissing all complaints and investigations against Mr. Leo. Furthermore, Mr. Morrison is suspended immediately, pending ethics review and disciplinary proceedings. She paused, then added, This case will be referred to the district attorney's office for further investigation of conspiracy and abuse of power. Chad's shoulders sagged. His future career, pension, and reputation had evaporated under the weight of his own arrogance. As for Eleanor, her downfall came not with a bang, but a quiet, humiliating collapse. "Mrs. Morrison," the council president said, "while we cannot remove you from your HOA position, we strongly recommend your immediate resignation from all leadership roles." It wasn't a command, but it didn't need to be. The message was clear. Eleanor was finished, but as the hearing ended, I didn't feel victorious. I felt relieved. Not because I had won, but because justice had prevailed without revenge. Because truth had spoken louder than intimidation. When asked if I wanted restitution, I shook my head. "I don't need compensation," I said. "I just want the record to show that private citizens have the right to stand up to corruption without fear." That afternoon, Sarah installed a new property sign near our mailbox. "Private residence, a federal oversight." It wasn't a threat. It was a reminder. Some neighbors don't fight back with noise, they fight back with evidence, and they win. The weeks that followed brought something we hadn't experienced in years: peace. Without Eleanor's iron grip, neighbors began talking again, collaborating, compromising, actually acting like a community. The HOA, now under new leadership, shifted from a tool of fear to a platform for cooperation. 3 weeks later, Chad's termination became official. Criminal charges followed, ensuring he'd never again abuse public trust for personal gain. Eleanor sold her home quietly 6 months later and disappeared from the neighborhood she once ruled. Her departure marked the true end of her reign. On our final evening on the porch that summer, Sarah and I sat quietly, sipping coffee as the golden sunset washed over Willowbrook Heights. Neighbors passed by, some to apologize, some to share stories they had once been too afraid to tell. We hadn't just exposed 2 corrupt people, we had reminded an entire community that silence isn't safe at HOA and that standing up doesn't require power, just truth. We didn't take down Eleanor and Chad, they just handed us the rope and tied the knots themselves. Still here? You're one of us now. Subscribe to HOAstory and binge like your group chat depends on it.